Well, welcome to the Big Picture podcast. I'm Thomas Fife-Schaw. I'm Managing Director of Ipsos Corporate Reputation in the UK. And I've been looking at reputation for a wide range of companies for over 16 years now, but I've spent the last 10 years really looking at reputation, what moves it, what shapes it, what underpins it in pharmaceuticals and life sciences. And it's been an interesting time of late. And of course, lots of headwinds, lots of interesting developments, not least of which is the latest moves into GLP-1s and weight loss, which are making the headlines quite a lot. And I'm really happy to be joined here today by Nick Adams, who has an extensive background in life sciences, in pharma, in medtech, and in reputation. So you've had roles in corporate branding, corporate reputation, corporate comms at Novo Nordisk, yep. and among others. And you've also worked with reputation agencies and research agencies in the past as well. Yep. I'm really excited to talk to you today about sort of the world of GLP-1s, but what it means for corporate reputation, both for pharma companies and those developing those at the moment, yep. But also the impacts on other industries as well. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for coming here. And we've seen GLP-1s catapulting pharma companies into a new cultural space, if anything.
Yeah.
You've seen a lot of headlines, a lot of discourse, and we're even starting to see aspects of lexicon shaped by GLP-1s and the discourse around it. And I think there's a sign that this is going to disrupt the traditional narrative of pharma corporate reputation, certainly for those who are exploring GLP-1s and those who already have portfolio with them in. And because it's in the sort of cultural zeitgeist in the public sphere, it's part of pop culture. We've seen name drops at the Oscars.
Yeah.
We've seen Elon Musk talking about his use of GLP-1s. Yeah. Because it's been that talking point for celebrities and influencers, it's exposing pharma companies to a level of scrutiny in a way that perhaps we haven't seen in recent history, the pandemic excepted. Do you think that new exposure is going to help or hinder long-term corporate reputation in pharma?
I mean, that's the magic question, really. I mean, from a corporate brand perspective, I mean, some of these pharma companies they wanted to get this awareness. When I used to work at Novo, we didn't get enough awareness to go and survey in the general public besides outside of home market. And now suddenly it's mentioned everywhere. And not only mentioned everywhere as Novo Nordisk or Eli Lilly, but also the drugs that we're manufacturing as well. So with awareness comes great things in terms of brand visibility and an ability to tell our story, but with awareness comes all the risks as well. So I think managed correctly, it can help. It can establish pharmaceutical companies entering the GLP-1 space with more credibility if they stick to their science, they stick to their innovation. But of course, there's tons of risks associated with it. And having your name spread out across social media, across TikTok, across Instagram, mentioned everywhere, has multiple issues which you need to deal with as a corporate communication team, as a media team, as an issues management team. But yeah, the flip side is that you're getting the awareness that you perhaps have always been looking for in some way or another, which allows you to actually manage your brand and work with it. So I think short term, it can help. Long term, if not managed correctly, it can definitely hurt corporate reputation. And it's that management correctly of the challenges which are being faced by your name and your voice being out there, which is the big challenge.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting. I'm just thinking about both the short and the long term dynamics here, because we know that pharma isn't really visible to the public in most markets. Most of the time, it's not really top of mind. We've done research with industry associations that have shown this, and it's quite frustrating, I think, for some corners of pharma and not in others. I think depending on what you do and what you're involved in as a pharma company, the therapy areas and so on, a high public profile may or may not be beneficial. But in the case of GLP-1s, the profile is there whether you like it or not.
100%, yeah.
And also so is the discourse, and there's some of that will be within control of communicators working in pharma. But also a lot of it isn't, and you're going to have to respond to that and plan for it in some ways. And, I'm thinking about the celebrity angle here.
Oh yeah,
we've pharma's been in pop culture representations as long as I've been looking at TV and radio. Yeah. Whether it's around clinical trial mispractice and like Constant Gardener, for example, through to things we've seen on Netflix around the Dropout or Dope Sick. There's a lot of portrayals of pharma as being slightly underhand, opaque, and devious. And so I wonder, how does a company sort of wrestle that tension between visibility of innovation at the moment, but also a discourse that currently seems to be quite positive, but could quite easily turn, if issues crop up or if people misuse medicines, for example. What would you say is the kind of things that they need to be looking out for when you're planning for that kind of long-term reputational stewardship?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, the conversation is very much about the products that are out there. It's not necessarily about the organizations behind it, but the organizations and the companies get bought into this when we start to talk about issues like access and affordability and who's actually can get hold of these drugs. And I think that's where the biggest interest is about a company like Novo or Lilly, that they are what is your role within that space? And that's where you have to manage that communication. That's where you have to manage that clear communication around those topics, which are company-wide. Again, the conversation online is very much mentioning the drug names. It's mentioning Ozempic, it's mentioning Mounjaro, Wegovy, and those are not necessarily always associated with which company they come from as well. I've noticed that within working in healthcare for so many years, that you don't necessarily know who the product or where it comes from unless that's brought into the conversation. I think, again, a huge amount of awareness has now been established around who is the company behind the actual drugs. And then your name starts being brought into the conversation with, again, access, affordability issues around the products. And I think that's where, from an issues management perspective, Big Pharma has that role to play. There's been supply chain issues as well. I mean, the demand is so high. So where do we stand in terms of that? There's been issues in terms of who has access to these products, primarily prescribed for obesity for diabetes at the moment, but being used for obesity and not morbid obesity, but mild obesity. So what role does the pharma companies have to have around that? And I think that's where the big challenge and the issues, essentially, you need to have your issues management, your crisis communication plans really tightly in place at the moment, because there is a new potential issue every day.
Well, it's interesting that example of the Oscars sponsorship, I think, and also the importance of articulating and being clear about your values, your purpose, what you stand for as an organization. It helps for all the usual reasons, employer brand and the ability to open doors with partners and so on. But I wonder if, again, to the point about historically a relative distance from the public when it comes to articulating corporate brand values, corporate brand purpose in pharma, whether pharma needs to rethink how it does this, because I think the positioning of why you should be trusted, what you stand for, your kind of moral compass, which is often the case in purpose and mission statements and so on, how you do that in a way that'll be visible and understood by the public, particularly if you want them to go to your company as the source of the truth. Think about your products as the safer and appropriately licensed routes. Do you think that's going to change the articulation of these things and how they think about it?
You got to think of it like this. I mean, from a corporate brand perspective, you're using that corporate brand for many, many different stakeholders. And corporate brand, of course, is so much more than one or two product brands that we have in a certain category. It's much wider than that. So Novo Nordisk, their whole essence of the brand is all around change, so they use it now as part of their kind of tackling. Driving change is what they're all about. And it started with they came from diabetes care, and they're working within the diabetes care space, and we built the corporate brand platform around changing diabetes. We can create change within diabetes care. So it's not just about the products on the market. It's about so much more we're doing around that to actually make change happen within that category. That actually kind of morphed into a changing obesity when some of the earlier products were entering the market, like liraglutide. But now they've kind of switched the whole corporate brand discourse to around this whole idea of driving change. We're here to drive change. So we're here to drive change within obesity. We're going to change the conversation about obesity, that it's a medical condition. We're here to change the conversation about how do we live in a city, for example. They have a whole program called Cities for Better Health. So how do we live in a city? What is that city environment doing to the way we are living, which is causing conditions like obesity and diabetes and cardiovascular issues and those kinds of things, and being part of that discourse, actually speaking about these, the environment, partnering with city councils, partnering with food companies, and really looking at public-private partnerships to see how do we actually change the whole discourse around a disease area, in this case now, obesity. And I think if you look at that, I mean, the way we're living today, the way we are eating, the way we're consuming, the lack of sleep, the stress and everything else, that is a big conversation to be part of. But if you really believe in driving change, you need to be part of that conversation as well, not just be providing products. And I think that's the power of a corporate brand, that you actually start to put in more behind it than just the products you have there. You're actually seen as being part of the solution. And that comes down to education and all those kind of things as well. And it also comes back to communications, clear, strong communications about this is what we stand for and this is what the reason we're in this space. So I think corporate brands and inherently then the corporate reputation of these companies is very much based upon what they do beyond the product.
Like, I think we might move on now to we're thinking about the impact on pharma.
Yep.
But of course, there's loads of impacts on other industries, and we were talking earlier on about what people are prepared to sort of do to lose weight if you're into fitness, for example. For years, loads of brands have had a very, very strong proposition around fitness, wellness, weight loss. Weight Watchers, Nike, Peloton, and others. And I saw an article in the Times on the weekend. It was Jeremy Clarkson, I think. He said he wonders whether people will look at it, people who take weight loss medication with suspicion, in that it looks like they've done a marathon, but actually they just drove around the course in a car. And is it fair or unfair and put the effort in to lose weight? But it's interesting. I wonder, how do brands with that heritage in wellness and heritage in what is usually something about effort and gumption, and things like this, certainly like with Nike, keep pushing and so on. How do they navigate this shift where you can possibly take a pill, or certainly take an injection to lose weight, without alienating the audiences and the constituents that they spent years building brands with?
Well, I suppose, I mean, look at the sports space and the performance space. I think that's one thing. You take a brand like Weight Watchers. I mean, I think that's kind of interesting because that's how the whole business model has been about losing weight and of course, getting people into classes. And I don't know how that works. I've not been there, but it's, but I think for them, of course, they should still be part of the journey of people losing weight. And I think that's the pivot everybody's got to do. It is we're here to support you in this journey, and this journey may be medically aided, and fantastic, because in some cases that is perhaps the only way forwards. And so being part of that journey, being part of that returning to health, returning to fitness, I think is where some of these brands just need to be seen that we've been trying to support you for years, but now we can support you even further because we know you're getting the aid you need because you need medication to help you get there. And I think fitness brands, they've been trying this for years. I think maybe there's a challenge, those ones which have all been all about weight loss, and maybe it's a bigger story now about overall health outcomes and being healthy and healthy aging and those side of things, rather than just you're joining us, or you're joining our brand to lose weight. No, I mean that's one thing, but it's actually the continual and the long term effects of doing that brands in that sports space, in that weight or the gym and fitness should be part of. And I mean, we still, even if we lose weight, we still need to be going to the gym 2 or 3 times a week. We still need to be doing fitness 2 or 3 times a week. We still need to be walking 10,000 steps a day. So I think there's still plenty of room for that to continue, but it perhaps just gives us a different take on it, that we're here as part of your journey.
So an extension of the existing brand values and proposition, as opposed to complete abandoning ship and
I think
trying something new. I think that makes a lot of sense in fitness and wellness. But I think an industry that's facing perhaps slightly different challenges is food and beverage. We've seen news stories about investors speculating about the impact of GLP-1s on the likes of drinks companies, for example, or we saw Krispy Kreme at one point took a hit to investor confidence briefly. And we've had CEOs in those industries taking various different approaches to responding to the challenge here. Either it's a blip, we'll get around it, or really scared and getting in touch with the CEOs of Novo Nordisk, for example, had taken a few phone calls from worried execs. And because these drugs fundamentally change behavior and cravings, for example, for food, the quantity of food you might want to or be able to eat, are we going to start seeing a proliferation of GLP-1 friendly extensions to brands? Or do you think it's too risky to acknowledge that appetite suppression is, for example, is changing their world?
GLP-1 friendly, I'm not so sure about, but being there as part of your journey again, I think it's been going on already for the last couple of decades at least. I mean, protein-heavy food, fiber-rich foods, healthy foods. However, I think the food industry is, they're smart enough. They've been doing this for decades, understanding consumers and what they need, and probably behind, in some ways, obesity itself, with the amount of ultra-processed food that we're eating and that side of things. At the same time, I think they're smart enough to also be able to reposition to help people on their journey with healthy snacks, with products which are made for people who are looking for better health. But they've been doing that already. Let's be honest. I think I saw I think it's CEO Mondelez, Cadbury's owner, the other day, saying that they are monitoring GLP-1 and the amount of use and amount of people are using it, and he was positive from Mondelez perspective, but negative from obesity perspective, saying that he just believes that people will put the weight back on again, and they'll come back to their comfort products, their indulgence products that they've been buying all along. I find that quite negative in terms of, because you're really hoping that, that if people have regained health and regained fitness, that they will hopefully stay within that space. And I think that's the other story also about GLP-1. So, if people are actually going to stay on those drugs forever, a bit like blood pressure, that you will have that for life. If it seems that way, that with obesity being a medical condition, that you will need to go down to a lower dose but continue it, which then could actually remove people from actually wanting that chocolate. Oprah said she used to be the tequila queen, but she's like, I have no room. You can take it or leave it. I'm not that bothered anymore, and that is interesting. And I can understand why alcohol is also an indulgence that we have that could also be taking a hit. And I think there could be hits across the board here, but I think the food and drinks industry is smart enough to navigate around this change in consumer behaviour.
I've certainly seen comment from food and drink CEOs and that their R&D departments are big enough and have enough heritage and experience to adapt and move accordingly. And this trend isn't moving so fast that they can't adapt in time. But it's interesting, a slightly potentially cynical take on people are going to come back to chocolate because they'll come off these drugs, assuming that this could be a fad. And to your point, if the dynamics of that medication changes and that becomes just a part of life, it remains to be seen. But I guess the flip side to that is that they probably need to then think about the brand building for the long term.
Yeah.
Because if you built a brand, let's take ice cream, for example, of indulgence, of specific moments and all of the kind of emotional cues that come around brand value and your brand proposition, do they keep doing that in the same way, or do they take a different tack? Because I imagine how you feel about ice cream, if you really don't crave ice cream, you're going to need a different sort of emotional attachment to it.
That's true. But I bought, a protein heavy ice cream the other day. I mean, so they're already moving into this space and trying to find a healthy alternative to that indulgence. Was it as good as the real thing? Yeah, maybe, but there was certainly less sugar. So again, I think the food industry has been moving into this space already. They're already been part of doing that. However, at the same time, I mean, there's a huge amount of marketing that goes behind us to buy that protein product versus something which actually has existed. For example, protein milkshakes versus just regular milk itself, or soft drinks versus milk itself. And that's a whole probably other space you and I don't want to get into. But there's. I think again, like the fitness and the healthcare brands or the health and wellness brands, it's about, we're here to support your journey. I mean, people still need to eat at the end of the day, but they need to eat more healthily.
So I suppose that's where functional foods, like the protein, ice cream, could sort of change the game. But I guess another one is insurance. And again, this is a real tightrope in that they might be worried about the expense of a long-term supporting people on long-term medication using GLP-1s versus looking like you're blocking access to care.
Yep.
If they say no to these things. I wonder then, does that mean the insurance industry is probably going to have a role in the narrative around access, for a start, that pharma companies don't currently have license to do? Do you think that's going to change the game there a bit?
Well, insurers are really, they can either be the villain here or the enabler. I think they really, I suppose, certainly in markets where insurance covers a huge amount of access, like markets like the US, for example, they really are helping. They can stop or give access to the products that are out there, and I think with GLP-1s, they have a massive role to play. But and here comes a lot of health economic data in as well, in terms of, by taking this product for so many months, years, what's that versus other gastric bypass surgery, for example. So they have a huge role to play in terms of access and affordability of these products.
I'd like to just think about mergers and acquisitions briefly. As you've talked about the size of the prize. We've both seen charts of the sheer volume of both big pharma and sort of small startups, both in biotech and in pharma, sort of trying to get into this space. And there's obviously a big flurry of acquisitions and things like this. Do you think that they're a good signifier of innovation, and do you think that would appeal to investors, particularly if you don't have any heritage in the weight loss, obesity, or even diabetes space? What do you think of the sort of risks and rewards of that?
Well, I guess there's a bit of a gold rush going on now towards this GLP-1 space. And if you are perceived as being one of those land grabbers, I think the reputational risks are massive. I think, companies acquiring a smaller player within GLP-1 space, the why has got to be really clear. And if that why is, we're here to innovate for patients to make their lives better, then you're probably in a good space. If that why is, no, we just want a piece of the pie, I think people are going to see through that really quickly. If you don't have reputation within the space, I think actually, particularly with this category and with the public demand for it, that might be okay, and you may still be able to enter the space. I think traditionally in other categories, it's very difficult if you don't have the heritage. But because of this public demand for these products, I do think there's room for smaller players long term. And again, if somebody can get that product into a pill rather than injectable, wow, that is really going to change, and probably going to change the whole affordability and the accessibility around GLP-1s. So, but yeah, the why has got to be really clear when it comes to your acquisition. And again, an acquisition's got to be made because it's about making a better product to help more and more people at the end of the day.
I think that why piece is really important. I mean, pharma reputation is always got a challenge, certainly in the public sphere, of a tension between a recognition of innovation and R&D prowess, for example, and a trust in medicine and trust in scientists, but also an uncertainty about motives, particularly when it comes to making money. And so that why becomes really important, because if you're just seen as land grabbing, to that sort of gold rush analogy, then I think that could be really, really damaging. And I think that the ripple effects would happen go across the whole industry. So I think from the one hand, if you're a big pharma and you're making acquisitions, that needs to be, that's a really significant challenge. And I'd be interested to see, where that goes right or wrong. But I guess there has been examples in the past of farmers. If pharma makes the news for M&A activity every few years, there's a big sort of flurry of spending. There's a bit of flurry of spending post-pandemic as well, actually. I wonder, are there any sort of rules of thumb about how do you, make the wise choice that's true to your principles, your value, your purpose, whilst also satisfying that raw investor demand for commercial success? From a communications perspective, what's the advice you'd give?
Well, again, I mean, yes. I mean, mergers and acquisitions within pharma have just been part and parcel of the industry for such a long time, and often, yes, it is about securing future pipeline, quite simply. But it could also be about securing future innovation as well. And I think that's when acquisitions are done correctly, because they're based upon, we perhaps do not have the resources or the skills or the know-how in-house, but it is in a related field or related area. When it's one of those mergers and acquisitions, but it's a completely new area, I think there's much more scrutiny. But I think it's just the nature of the pharmaceutical business that mergers and acquisitions are part of what we do, and almost expected. And if you're not merging and acquiring, you're probably going to get merged or acquired yourself. And that, I think is just the way. If the companies cannot grow organically, they're able to upskill. And I think especially if you're moving into new therapy areas and into new, that's where you probably are going to need to acquire to actually be able to upskill quickly rather than try and do it organically. Again, it comes with its risk in terms of communication, but it's nothing that's not been seen before. So I think the playbooks are pretty much in place for those kind of things.
Plenty of institutional memory in those big companies. So I guess then, looking at the other end of the spectrum, those small startups, let's say, take the example of a small startup develops a successful oral GLP-1. They're going to change overnight. You're going to see this huge explosion of growth. And if they're particularly small, managing and understanding the reputational impact and managing communications and corporate affairs is probably going to be entirely new to them. And I wonder, are there any sort of good examples of or either where this has happened before, and perhaps lessons that could be learned, not just in pharma, but any context of sort of an industry with very, very fast growth? Or, what are the kind of fundamentals of baseline reputation building, or thinking about corporate brand, what you stand for, what you project to the world? What would your recommendations be there?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a bit of work in the biotech space, and these novel compounds and novel companies that come up from almost nowhere. They need to build a brand very quickly. What comes first, the brand or the reputation? Well, you probably got to do a part of brand building first to actually establish who you are, what do you stand for, and certainly there's going to be some kind of internal brand, but that external exposure of that is going to be the first time it does get exposed, and who's going to trust you if you come into the market and you don't have any experience there? I mean, trust levels are going to be low for that company, for starters. If the product's good, if the product is tolerable, less side effects, is accessible, is affordable, then reputation can probably grow pretty quickly within those companies. That whatever company is the manufacturer of that product, they're going to grow fast. But it's maintaining that as well. When the obvious issues and crises will come along with misinformation or those sort of things, and how they deal with that. And you're right, these kind of smaller companies are going to need to build corporate affairs departments pretty quickly to deal with the challenges that come with it. And then I think, again, it's back to if you're playing one of those smaller players versus big pharma. I mean, big pharma have got so much more muscle when it comes to the educational side, the relationships with the healthcare providers, the relationships with the insurers and the payers and that side of thing as well. So it's not easy to break into a new market just because you've got a great product. Even if you've got a great reputation, it will take a lot more and a lot of marketing muscle to get even these smaller players into this space, because it's already beginning to crowd with big pharma.
Very tricky, and I guess there's probably lessons that could be learnt from the pandemic. Particularly when it comes to how the speed of development of various treatments around that. What we have also seen from the pandemic is, and to quote Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, reputation can be won in drops and lost in buckets. And I think depending who you are post-pandemic, there's some companies did experience that. Yeah. And I wonder, what do companies need to be monitoring and mindful of? What do they need to understand? What insights do they need in their world to try and understand, trust, understand the rules of the game, and understand those risks? What should they be really attuned to and thinking about in order to get this right?
I mean, reputation fundamentally is trust at the end of the day. Do we trust you to do the right thing when it comes down to it? And I think when you have that scientific credibility, it takes you quite a long way. But then again, it's so much more than just the product itself. It's about, are we continuing to innovate? Are we continuing to invest in R&D to build not just our pipeline, but better products for more and more people? Do we have good corporate citizenship? Are we good player? Do we have good governance? Are we strong leadership? Reputation is a factor which has got so many things built around it, where pharma companies, need to be very much attuned to that. At the moment, the dialogue is very much around that one driver of reputation, which is product. And it probably always will be. And then within there, you start to unpack the issues which are coming again around accessibility, affordability, supply chain. In GLP-1 case, is this a lifestyle medicine, or is it for chronic obesity? And yes, you need to be attuned to that. You at Ipsos probably have some more ideas about how to best attune to what's going on within that space and advise corporate communicators and corporate affairs folks what they should be monitoring. But there's that long-term effect, which is reputation, which of course is what we're looking for. And you're hoping that reputation will continue to grow. You mentioned Pfizer, and I think a few of the players out of the COVID-19 did get good reputational lift off that. But it also surprises me, or doesn't surprise me really, how fickle consumers and patients are. That we tend to forget. We tend to forget all kinds of things when it comes to who was actually behind the product we're actually using. Unfortunately, unless we can continue to deliver over time. So I think for giving that consistent, good, strong customer experience is what it all comes down to when it comes to reputation.
I do wonder, though, still on the media relations point, whether in the era of AI, whether the temptation would be to have smaller but AI-enabled media relations teams on the promise that AI will solve all the problems, or whether traditional, well-resourced media relations teams will be really important at this moment in time, for the same reasons as the pharmacovigilance teams that we talked about earlier on.
Absolutely, and I mean, AI will be being used already to help form narratives, to help form conclusions, summaries. I mean, just look at the whole data side of this as well, which I know pharma companies are using a huge amount of AI into to help develop the products of the future as well. Just reading through scientific literature and using AI to actually scan for what's going on. I mean, there's so much potential there as well. obviously from a comms perspective, there is also so much potential, and even with people perhaps still in this doubting phase at the moment about how much of it is true and authentic and genuine. But I mean, I think infusing those with the corporate voice, that's why we have our brand books, with our values, with our tone of voice, with our with our look, with our feel, with our image style. I mean, you can actually infuse that with AI to actually help your communication teams have more strength. So yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's not about expanding in terms of people, but certainly in terms of resources when it comes to digital tools.
So that was brilliant talking with Nick for Obesity, the Big Picture podcast. Loads of lessons there for pharma communications and reputation building and beyond pharma as well. Really interesting to see how this pans out in the future and being part of that conversation with our clients going forward.